Environmental racism.
This project is brought to you by Cyriana, Lara, Paramore, and Kaylie, Yuen.
When you think of environmental justice, what's the first thing that comes to mind? You're probably thinking about planting trees, gardening, or global warming. Although these things are considered environmental justice, have you ever heard of environmental racism? No, it's not just kicking trees. Most people would assume it's something like pollution, but that's a long way from the actual definition. So you may be wondering, what exactly is environmental racism?
Environmental racism is the practice in which people of color are forced to live closer to large amounts of trash, garbage, landfills, power stations, and other types of toxic waste. As a result, members of these communities are expected to have more health issues and be at risk for higher exposure to harmful chemicals. The first known use of the phrase environmental racism was by Benjamin Chavez, a civil rights leader in 1982. Chavez stated it was racial discrimination in environmental policy making, deliberate targeting of communities of color for toxic waste facilities, life-threatening presence of poisons and pollutants, and the history of excluding people of color from leadership of the ecology movements. To put things into perspective, a big event happened in Warren County. The government polluted the area by moving an enormous amount of hazardous waste close by. The residents fought back, however the government still continued moving the waste. Environmental racism is also racial discrimination when it comes to policies related to the environment, which leads to the policies not being enforced equally, which allows this inequality to continue, which leads to an increase of health issues for people living in these communities. This shows the mistreatment of people of color and their communities by allowing them to live next to landfills or dumping toxic waste in their neighborhoods. With all this discrimination happening in many communities across the U.S., it leads you to wonder, what factors actually led to environmental racism?
Environmental racism is something that stems from a number of different reasons. Why do large corporations and the government target poor communities of color when looking for somewhere to dump their waste? Some factors include cheap land, poverty, lack of political power, etc. The only reason poor minority neighborhoods are affected is because neighborhoods with money have the resources to enact change.
Now that we know what environmental racism is and the factors that started it, how can we put an end to it? A common term used to describe anti-environmental racism is environmental justice. Though it does not focus on solving individual issues, it works to highlight the issue at hand and to undo the years of systematic racism our society is built on today. The term environmental justice stems from a movement that began in the 1950s that worked to combat Black communities being polluted with hazardous waste. Now, the term environmental justice has expanded its horizons and has raised awareness to countless other issues, such as making better, healthier food more accessible. Thanks to environmental justice, we as citizens can understand the issue at hand. But where do we start? The most important thing we can do is self-educate. By self-educating, we are able to recognize the organizations that continue to use discriminatory practices and choose to find more representative and reliable organizations to donate and volunteer at. Additionally, hold your representatives accountable. Write letters to your aldermen, protest, and petition. Whether it's state or local government, it's so important to raise awareness.
To wrap things up, you've learned that environmental racism is the mistreatment of people of color by forcing them to live next to landfills or dumping toxic waste in their communities, which leads to an increase of health issues. You've learned that environmental racism started due to large corporations and the government needing a place to deposit waste and garbage, which led them to do so in communities of color. Large corporations and the government alike know that the residents don't have the resources or political power to stop them, which continues this inequality. Lastly, self-educate, whether it's environmental racism or any other topic. Volunteer, donate, and raise awareness to the issue at hand in order to better our community and society. Thank you for watching.